It's a money laundering scheme that's taking your money and then funding a whole industry, a whole sector of activists and academics. This is one of those stories that even if only one part of it were true, it would be bad enough. But it doesn't stop there. It's actually multiple bad things conspiring together to make something that's much worse overall. I think it was David Henry Thoreau who said something to the effect of, for every 1,000 people hacking at the leaves or the branches of evil, there's maybe one person hacking at the root. Now, I'm not going to suppose that I am the only one hacking at the root, but I noticed this story come across my feed, and I noticed something in myself where I typically get distracted by the leaves and the branches. And this time around anyway, I dug a little bit deeper, and I want to share a little bit about what I found. Something really stuck out to me about this podcast, and then it had me do a little bit of research and do some digging into the people behind this podcast and the people that are on this podcast. Now, I think the actual content of the podcast itself has lots of problems with it, but I don't want you to get distracted by the content because I want to go behind what it is. And I'll give you a little sample, and I want you to pay particular attention to the personalities, to the two guests that are on this podcast. So there's 3 people on the podcast. There's the host, her name is Laura Lynch, she's a CBC journalist. And then she's got these 2 experts on that are going to talk about climate misinformation and the danger of that. But I want you to pay attention. I'll play a little clip here, if I can find it. And I want you to pay attention to their, as she introduces the actual people, the actual guests.
Any further with this, can I ask both of you to tell our listeners who you are? Erin, let's start with you.
Hi, so I'm Erin Blondeau, and I'm a writer. I'm an occasional independent journalist, and I'm also the communications director at the Climate Emergency Unit. Thank you so much for having me. And Chris, it's really great to be on another panel with you again.
Oh, well, there, Chris. Chris, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm Chris Russell. I'm an associate.
So if you didn't catch that, Erin and Chris know each other. They've been on other panels, and that's important to the story. I'll say more about that in a few minutes.
Professor at the School of Journalism and Communication and an academic director at Re.Climate, a Center for Climate Communication and Public Engagement, both housed at Carleton U. And same, it's great to be here with you, Erin, and you again, Laura.
I am, Laura.
So great to be with you again, Erin, or you again, Erin, and you again, Laura. So it sounds like maybe he's been on this podcast. I won't torture you with too much of this podcast, but just to give you a little bit of a flavor. Let me just jump ahead here a little bit. I'm trying to remember where about it was. She talks about conspiracy theories.
Directing that anger at the wrong targets. That's why I actually believe that we need to address the root causes of social and economic inequality alongside climate education and climate solutions.
So who do you think is most susceptible to conspiracy theories that are linked to extreme weather?
I think that a few years ago, I would have said for sure people like me who grew up in poverty, had limited access to education. But now I think that we're seeing a mainstreamification of conspiracy culture. It's all around us. And so I think that anyone is susceptible to conspiracy culture. I think that anyone can be taken.
Okay, that's enough of that. So the mainstreamification, to use her words, of conspiracy theories. So without dragging you through the entire podcast, it's about 20 minutes long. The gist is, there's these terrible right-wing conspiracy theorists that aren't buying into the climate crisis challenge and what can we do about it. And I was curious about who these people are, these experts that are on the show. So I did a little bit of digging. Let's look first at what I found on Dr. Chris Russell. So he's part of this organization called Re.Climate. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be pronounced Re.Climate. And they are bringing practitioners and researchers together to build insight and drive action. But it's specifically about communication or communicating for change. So I won't drag you through their entire website, but basically it's about how can they tell better stories or better narratives or have better messaging to convince people about, from their perspective, the dangers of climate change or the climate crisis, as we're now calling it, it seems. There's something about their people, programs and services. Oh, they offer like training and resources to government. So they can, if you're in the government, you can hire them out, or private companies as well, I guess, about, they got titles such as global burning, what do Canadians really think about climate change, etc., etc. Where was the thing about their team? Oh, here it is. Okay. So Chris Russell, he's the one on the podcast. So I went through, there's about 11 people on the team, but then they have some researchers or research associates, so a couple more. So maybe, I think I counted 11, 12, 13 people. Now some of these people, you can look them up here. Chris Russell with an I. So he's working at Carleton University, and he's currently making $160,000. You can see his earning curve there. So he's employed by the provincial government, and that's, I think, important to this story. There are some other people here. So a couple of them are also, oh, here's Carleton, so Barbara Leckie. I looked some up for where there were salaries, but these are people who are making, I think, 175, 160, 180. And then there's these other people for whom we don't have salary information. Why do I bring this up? Well, I think, well, this is part of what seems to be going on here, is you have this professor, and you know what, he's a professor, he presumably teaches classes, does research, etc. He's hired by our government, our provincial government, our conservative Doug Ford government, which is worth noting here. And then he's part of this Re.Climate organization that is about how to pitch or how to frame information or communication or narrative around it. So that's Chris. That's a little bit about Chris. There's more we can say, actually a little bit more about this organization. Some of it, oh, this is David Suzuki. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. So yeah, let's move on to Aaron. So Aaron is part of the David Suzuki, not the foundation, the David Suzuki Institute, which is a related organization. So the David Suzuki Institute is a nonprofit organization that raises public awareness and advances political action in Canada on the climate and biodiversity crises and their solutions. So they're overtly political, and part of the David Suzuki Institute has something called the Climate Emergency Unit. Just as a quick aside here, as I was researching this, I was trying to figure out how these organizations are funded. I was using AI, I was Googling, and I was able to find some stuff, and other stuff is kind of difficult. But one thing I noticed is there's all these organizations, these foundations, and they seem to fund one another, so that you might have an organization that is funded by the government, and then that organization in turn funds like a not-for-profit like this one. So it's kind of hard to track exactly how much public money is going into these. Certainly with Chris Russell, through Carleton University, which as a university is a mid-sized Ontario university. I understand it gets about $500 million, so that's $500 million each year from your paycheck, from your taxes. Now, am I saying that it does no good? I'm not saying that, of course, but some of that money, I guess, is going to fund Chris Russell and his Re.Climate organization. So now let's look at the Climate Emergency Unit. So this is Erin Blondeau. She's the other one on this podcast, and well, I think her bio says a lot. So first thing we need to know about her is Erin uses she, her pronouns, and she's Métis. She's a mom. She's currently living and working on the west coast of so-called British Columbia in unceded Kwetsuan territory. Her paternal family comes from the Red River settlements and the Qu'Appelle Valley, and her maternal family is British and Eastern European. So it's interesting, we get through about half her bio, and it's all about her the fact that she's Métis, that she works or lives in so-called British Columbia. So there's a lot of political stuff just in there. But anyway, she's a communications person. She's also associated with this other group I found. Where did it go? It's called Impact 5. Where's their... I think I'm saying that right. Impact 5. So something to do with oceans and environmentalism and the ocean. And I'm not sure if she's paid by them or not, but this organization does get both funding from the British Columbia government and our federal government. I'll show you that in a second. So she's part of their Young Professionals Committee, and there's a little write-up about her. So I'm not sure if that's a paid position or not. That's not clear. But what is clear is the Government of Canada is a proud partner of this Impact 5 organization, whatever that is. And we even have a little quotation from our Prime Minister, which you can read for yourself. So this is beginning to show like where the problem is. And we've seen what's going on in the US with the USAID, which is their foreign aid branch, where Elon Musk's Department of, what is it called? Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE or whatever it's called, seems to be unearthing like a lot of, what's essentially money laundering, it seems, where government money is going to different organizations to fund kind of ridiculous things like lesbian dance theory in Colombia and that kind of thing. These sort of very political activist initiatives. I think we definitely have something going on that's similar in Canada. Now, I think I just happened upon this little thing. I don't think it's a ton of money, but that's not the point. We've got Aaron Blondeau, we've got Chris Russell, one of whom is definitely getting public funds, and the other, she's either doing work for this group, she's associated with it. It's also interesting to see that these same people, let's turn the sound down here, these same people, Aaron and Chris, were on a panel together that was sponsored by UBC, the University of British Columbia. Were they paid to be on the panel or not? I don't know, but there's Dr. Chris Russell from Carleton University, and if we fast forward here a little bit, he turns it over to Aaron Blondeau, who again talks about her pronouns and the fact that she's Métis, etc., etc. Okay, so we've got two guests on a podcast, both of whom seem to be getting at least some money from the government. They're brought on to this podcast that's on the CBC, which is funded by your taxpayers, by your tax dollars, to the tune of $1.4 billion, according to AI and what I was able to find. It's funny, some people throw around 1.3, 1.2, 1.4, and it's funny, that 0.34 or whatever it is seems like a rounding error, but let's not lose sight that a 0.1 of $1 billion is still $100 million. It's a lot of money. So what we have here is we have two people that are presented as experts who are funded by various governments to not go solve an environmental problem. It'd be one thing if we're paying money for them to go put trees in the ground, but no, they're both engaged/employed in talking about how we can do a better job convincing people about the climate crisis itself. It's very much, I would call it propaganda, frankly. That's really what it is how can we convince people of this? And then we're using our publicly funded broadcaster to give them a platform to present them, not in a critical manner. It's not like they disagreed on different things. They were seen as the experts, and they just talked about how scary the far right is and Elon Musk and why are these climate deniers out there and what can we do to educate them. And that reminds me of a video I made earlier, and I hope I should maybe look it up here. I should have had this ready, but there's someone who left I think their handle is Carruthers Druthers or Druthers Carruthers, one of those two. Let me see if I can find it here as I talk. And he or she, I mentioned a few videos back, I made a video about intellectualism as a new religion. I'll put a link in the description. And let's see if I can talk and find this at the same time. And it had to do with this woman named Cynthia Miller Idris or Idris. Here we go. I think I've got it. And yeah, Carruthers, Druthers. Anyway, in that video, I mentioned a bit of a COVID rabbit trail or rabbit hole. When I was researching this video, our High Priests of Reason, I stumbled upon a few things having to do with Cynthia Miller Idris. So it turns out that she is also an academic. She works for American University, which is in Washington, D.C., which I think in the last 2 fiscal years has received about $1.75 billion from the U.S. federal government. So she's paid by the U.S. federal government. And even though my video was about using intellectualism seen it as a religion, it turns out that Cynthia Miller Idris, here she is here, she has this, I'm not sure what you call it, it's called PEARL, Polarization and Extremism Research and Innovation Lab, which is part of the School of Public Affairs, which is part of American University, which is funded by the U.S. federal government. And again, it's not really clear how this team is funded. Do they get private donations? Perhaps. But just sort of, and I looked at some of their bios. How many people did I count here? I think 25. And these, program manager. Okay, I'll just click on a few. She's a program manager. She's a PhD candidate at George Mason University. So a lot of these people are already PhDs, have advanced degrees. Here's a finance and grant specialist. She processes vouchers and invoices. Okay. And works with the money, the grants. She received her degree in economics from American University. Is proud to be working here. Okay. I won't go through all of this, but the point is they're funded, it seems, at least in part, by this university, which is funded by taxpayers. And a lot of what they do, and I came across, do I still have it here? So part of the work of this lab is, it had to do with COVID, about studying the link between conspiracy theories and vaccine hesitancy. And they even did work where they came up with, they call it a code book, to try to figure out all the scary right-wing memes about vaccine hesitancy, trying to get their head around why people aren't taking these vaccines. And what's interesting is they kind of dance on the head of a pin, trying to figure out and sort of debating, well, does vaccine hesitancy come first? And once you're vaccine hesitant, then that leads you into conspiracy theories? Or is it the other way around? Do you believe in conspiracy theories and that makes you vaccine hesitant? They couldn't even fathom the idea that maybe there's good and right reasons to not be so quick to take a COVID vaccine. Again, I'm not going to relitigate COVID here, but let me just see if I can finish this point here. It's bad enough that we've got the CBC and the corporate media not doing journalism. That, if that's all they were doing, that would be, a bad news story and something we should do about. It's something we should do something about. It's bad enough that our government takes our money through taxes and mismanages it on stupid things, like, funding this kind of stuff. But it's yet another thing when they take our money, fund academics to come up with propaganda and ways to try to convince us of certain things. and then use a public platform to spread that. Like, it really seems like it's a whole industry of activists and academics and governments working together, all funded by you and me. It'd be one thing if they were doing this on their own dime, if they believe in a cause and they want to knock on doors and raise $10 here and $20 here, have people volunteer. I'm sure there are some people that do that. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's completely funded by the government, but there seems to be like it's a whole industry. And people on the left are typically quick to point out how, you know, the fossil fuel industry or big tobacco or big pharma or any other industry can kind of manipulate things. And they're not wrong to say that. There can be powerful industries. I've worked in pulp and paper. I've worked in IT for large companies. I've worked for a building supply company that, you know, manufactured pipe. And I've seen firsthand, not to say that it's completely corrupt, but you get enough power, you get a few large companies together, and they begin to write regulations. They have money to lobby governments. And that happens, and we should keep our eye on it. And the left, rightfully so, is worried about that kind of thing. And frankly, I'm worried about that kind of thing as well. So if we're worried about that type of collusion, that type of powerful industry distorting things, what about this academic, activist, government collusion? Is that not also a problem? I think it is. I mean, to use it, like, I was talking to some friends the other night, and one of them commenting on my last video, he said he liked my comment about make government boring again. And I would like to make government boring again. And maybe I'm naive, but I think there was an age not that long ago where basically the government misspent our money. So they take our money and then they'd go buy snowplows or fire trucks or build bridges, buy army jeeps, that kind of thing. And inevitably, because government doesn't have direct competition, they would overpay. So something would normally cost $100,000. When the government does it, now it's costing $130,000, $140,000. And that sucked, and it was sort of like the inefficiency of government, and what are you gonna do? So that was bad enough. So by analogy, that would be like getting your roof reshingled or redone and overpaying for it. You have a contractor who, you know, pulls one over on you, and if the market price, it's been a while since we've had a roof done, but if the market price for doing your roof is $10,000, it's probably more nowadays, I don't know, he charges you $15,000. But the point is, he charges you more, he scams you, but you still get a new roof. So that's bad enough. That was sort of like the old way of doing government. Then it seemed like government 2.0 was they just take your money and then misspend it on something completely useless. It would be a little bit like that contractor coming to say he's going to fix your roof. He takes your money, instead of fixing your roof, he goes away to Las Vegas and lives it up for you know, a fun weekend or whatever he does. He blows the money. You never hear from him again. You're out your money, but your roof hasn't been done, so you're kind of out of luck that way. This third version would be akin, so that here they take your money and then hire these activists and academics to try to propagandize you, if that's a word. That would be akin to hiring a contractor, giving him some money. Not only does he doesn't fix your roof, he doesn't even run away with the money. Instead, he hires workers to come to your house with ladders, and instead of redoing your roof, he's drilling holes in your roof or tearing up shingles or damaging your roof, making it worse. That seems to be what's happening. We have this industry of activists that have over time convinced governments to give them money to basically come up with, you know, communications campaigns to convince us that the problem they're meant to solve is worse than we think it is. So they use their psychology and their university education to try to make better messages for us, to convince us it's a problem, so that governments can take more money so we can fund it, and around it goes. I don't know, I'm getting tired of it. I think it's corrupt. And, you know, there's part of me that, like, making this kind of video, well, am I being too hard on people? Well, you know, dishonesty and corruption is a problem. It's a problem with individuals, it's a problem with corporations, it's a problem with government, and we should speak out against it. Because it's deception. It's, you know, there's there's a section in the Bible, in the Old Testament, in the Pentateuch, in Leviticus. It sort of talks about this sort of moral code, and in the other places in the Bible, in Proverbs, I think it talks about using dishonest weights and measures. And I'll just read just a quick passage here this is from Leviticus chapter 19, verse 35. It reads, "You shall not cheat in measuring length, weight, or quantity. You shall have honest balances, honest weights, an honest ephah, and an honest hin. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt." An ephah and a hin, those are units of measure. So it'd be like saying you should have an honest bushel and an honest liter and an honest kilogram. Now, is it about weights and measures in the marketplace? Yes, but is it just that? I think it's speaking to something more important, that we should be honest with one another and not deceive. And when governments take our money, hire activists, and then basically peddle that back to us as though it's news, that's using dishonest weights and measures, and we should denounce it. So for the person who listens to the CBC, and I know there are some out there, I spent quite a bit of time kind of digging, using AI, trying to figure out where the money is, and it was difficult, and I was able to find some of it. But for the person just commuting to work, and they turn on CBC, What on Earth, and they hear, well, climate crisis, climate emergency, here are these experts, and watch out for the right wing, watch out for Elon Musk, watch out for conspiracy theories, and then they get to work and they just think, they just heard some, hard-hitting journalism about, how serious this climate crisis is. It's interesting, I don't know for sure, but I suspect it's one of these think tanks, one of these communication firms that is rebranding this whole climate crisis. It used to be called global warming. And then I guess that wasn't working, so they rebranded it to climate change. And now more recently, this the climate emergency or climate crisis. I want to be clear here, I'm not necessarily weighing in on what I think about the climate emergency or crisis or whatever it is. I do have concerns about the environment. That's not really the point. It's not about whether, even if the emergency was definitely true, I still don't want my government taking my money to try to propagandize me, and nor should you, I don't think. It's not how we ought to do things. And yet there's this whole group of people trying to do this. I'll leave you with this. I just want to show you one more thing here, because it really just shows, I guess, the level of activism. So this is, let's see if I can find it. This is the climate emergency unit that I talked about. Where was it? Enviro Muslims. They get funding from your government, by the way. I stumbled upon them. Oh, I can't find it. Was it this? David Suzuki. Oh, maybe I can't find it. Oh, it's going to bug me. It was these guys. Let's see if I can find it here quickly. Campaigns. Home. Basically, here it is. It's this film. I'll play a little bit of it. This was pretty so now I am getting into the content. So this is a little YouTube video that they made. Probably your taxpayer dollars help fund this, it seems, I guess. Don't know that to be 100% sure. And they're basically talking about how what we need to do is use war analogy. That we are this is like World War II. The Nazis are at the gates here, and we need to mobilize. And it's, I'll just play some of it. The climate crisis.
There is no home in Canada, no family, and no individual whose fortunes and freedoms are not bound up in the present struggle.
That's Prime Minister Mackenzie King speaking to Canadians at the outset of the Second World War. Today, another existential threat looms over us, the climate emergency. But don't worry, this is a hopeful video about what it would look like to unite to rapidly and dramatically lower our emissions and give future generations a fighting chance.
So they're literally using old propaganda videos to rebrand it for climate crisis. When they talk about what to do, it's like their 4-point plan. One of it is like spend with no limits or something. Oh, they even invoke
spent what was required. Deficits be damned. Canada, in the face of the COVID pandemic, lose the war, nothing will matter.
This is the largest economic program in Canada's history.
In the face of the COVID pandemic, Canada's governments have spent what was required. Deficits be damned.
Canada hasn't seen this type of...
Okay, I don't think I can take much more of that. I'll leave a link for that as well, but if you caught that, they're basically saying just how it was awesome when Trudeau said, deficits be damned, let's spend a ton of money for COVID. Like they're saying like that was awesome and we need to do more of that, but this time for the climate emergency, crisis, whatever they're calling it now. And the people that make this video, it seems to me, are being paid from your wallet, from your paycheck, and that information is being laundered through corporate media, and they're using the best and brightest minds that can understand human psychology, the power of narrative, the power of making videos to convince you of this problem. Forgive me if I'm suspicious about your cause when you think it's so necessary to use basically every means, including deception, at your disposal to convince me of something. The more you could try to do that, frankly, the less likely I am to get in line. Again, I'm going to stop it here, but this gets me a little worked up, and I think we need to dig into this more. We're looking at the USAID in the US. It's a money laundering scheme that's taking your money and then funding a whole industry, a whole sector of activists and academics, and they're setting out to make you less free, to confuse you, to propagandize you, and to use these resources to tell you that you're bigoted, you're racist, you're extreme, you're far right, you're a conspiracy theorist. We should not stand for this. This is deception, and we need to do something about it. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.